What's up, internet? Welcome back to my channel, and today we are going to change the fork seals on that Yamaha YZ250 there in the background. Rubber mallet. You want to make sure that you back off your compression clicker, and you might as well open up your pressure relief valve and just let any excess pressure that's inside the fork out before we take it apart. And when I say back off your compression clicker, that basically means turn it counterclockwise until it's all the way out, until it stops. And then the same thing on the other end of the fork where your rebound clicker is. All right, this is the first special tool we're going to use, and we'll use this to remove the cap on top of the fork here. So what we'll do is, before we take the fork out of the tube, we loosen the upper triple clamp bolts. Then we use our special tool to loosen the cap, which should be very tight, should be pretty easy. So once the cap is loose and the two upper triple clamp bolts are loose, you can go ahead and loosen two bottom triple clamps, and be careful that the fork doesn't just slide out and smack the ground. Next step is we're just going to loosen up this cap and drain all of the fluid in the outer tube out of the fork. We've got all of the fork fluid drained out of the outer tube. We screwed the cap back on. We just snugged it up. You don't need to tighten or anything. And we've got the bottom end in a vise with the rag so we don't damage the bottom of the fork. And then we're going to break loose this 17 millimeter socket. Okay, you can see we've got this nut loose and it's sticking out of the bottom of the fork now. It doesn't actually come off. It's got a lock nut on the other side, and this is where our next special tool comes into play here. So what we're going to do is we're going to flip the fork upside down, stand it on the piece of 4x4 down there, and then we're going to push down from the bottom, and we're going to slide this thing underneath it so it doesn't sneak back into the fork, and that will give you access to the lock nut so that you can actually remove this bottom nut here. Alright, so what we did is we just pushed down on the bottom of the fork. We've got our fork cap resting on a piece of 4x4 so we don't damage that, pressing against the cement floor. And there you can see the special tool, and it just slides underneath. Slides underneath this lock nut. So we'll put a wrench on the lock nut here and a ratchet up top here and break it loose. Alright, next we're going to take off this dust seal. And the oil seal is actually underneath that inside the outer tube here. You can't see it, but there's a little clip in here, and that holds the fork seal in place. We're going to pop that out with this little screwdriver. And there's this guy, so now you can see we've got the dust seal and this little retainer clip. And the next part is not super intuitive, but I encourage everybody to read their service manuals because this isn't going to feel right, but it's what you're supposed to do. Make sure you remove this little clip first, because this next step isn't going to work if you leave that in. And basically we're just going to yank it apart. Boom, that's it. Alright, here's our fork disassembled. It's almost 100% disassembled. It's disassembled as far as we're going to take it for the simple oil dust seal replacement. But there's actually an inner tube in here, and there's also oil in here. And when I do a complete fork rebuild, I actually take the inner tube out. There's O-rings in there, and I'll put fresh oil in there, and then do the rest of what we're actually doing here with a new set of seals. And I'll actually replace all this hardware, which I'm not going to do this time. All we're going to do this time is put in a new set of dust seals and fork seals and some fresh oil. All of the inner hardware, we're just going to keep that and put it back on the fork when we read. Okay guys, the last thing that I'm going to do before we start to reinstall and put this fork back together is I'm going to do a quick inspection of the inner tube here. And the reason why I do this is because what I found over the years, and this probably mostly applies to people that are riding tracks with lots of other people, racing, mainly motocross. If you do a lot of trail riding, this probably isn't a problem that you have to deal with. But what I found is these fork inner tube covers, these fork covers, they work pretty good, but they're not perfect. So this is the front of the fork tube. So imagine your wheel, it's right here. These fork covers installed like this, and the main purpose of these fork covers is to protect the tube, this is the inner tube, from the roost that's being thrown at you by the bikes in front of you. Somehow, I still get roost hitting my inner tube, and that becomes a problem because it will create little divots and scratches on the surface of the tube. And then what happens is you put a new fork seal on, and as that fork seal is going up and down, and you're riding your bike across the terrain of the track, those little imperfections from the roost of other bikes will actually cut the new seals. And so what I always do is I just kind of go around the tube and I look for any imperfections in the metal. Basically, I'll use like my fingernail. If I see something, I'll run my fingernail over the top of it. If I feel anything that might cut the new seal I'm about to put on, I will take 600, maybe 800 grit sandpaper, and I will wet sand it. So basically what that means is I will take really fine sandpaper, 600 to 800 grit sandpaper, dip it in a little bit of water, and I'll smooth out any of those imperfections that I feel could potentially cut the new seal that I'm about to put on the bike. So, use that tip at your own risk. Guys, one last quick tip. Now, this lock nut, you want to make sure it actually threads on, and so you can actually turn this up and reduce the number of threads that are protruding out from the lock nut. And this lock nut is used against your rebound dampening. So if you remember correctly, this actually screws into the bottom of your inner tube, but it's also got threads on the inside, and it screws onto this push rod right here and locks up against this lock nut. So if you were to change the position of the lock nut by threading it up or threading it down, then it would actually change the aggregate length of your fork, and you could end up with one fork longer or shorter than the other, and that would not be good. So one thing you can do if you're not confident that this will maintain position is you can actually count the number of threads, write it down, and it's a good valid check too. So when you pull your other fork apart, you can make sure that the lock nut is in the same position as the first fork. I actually like to use a little bit of oil when I'm reassembling, and so I'm going to go ahead and pour a bunch into this ratio right. I'm using 7-weight, what is this, man? Bel-Ray. I'm using 7-weight Bel-Ray fork oil. They are not a sponsor of my channel. I have no sponsors. Nobody loves me. One reason why I like these particular fork oil bottles is because you get this really cool pop top. You screw this off, and it just kind of makes it easy to pour. And I'm all about making things easy. That's also why I run Honda oil in my YZ250 transmission. Really, it's just because of this really easy to pour top. That almost sounded like a commercial. Oh gosh, I'm getting bad. All right, next step is we're going to take our fork seal driver, situate this around the inner tube, and it will drive the fork seal into position. The fork seal is down inside the outer tube, and you'll know how far to go because the groove that this ring sits in will be exposed. Okay, we got our dust seal back in. We got that ring that holds the fork seal in place. Fork seal's in position. We're good to go. Okay, we're ready to reassemble this. First, put the spring in. Next, we drop in our dampening assembly. Screw the dampener into the outer tube. Flip it upside down. Alright, our fork is fully assembled. All you have to do now is unscrew the dampener from the outer tube and fill it up with oil. This next step, all we're going to do is fill the outer tube with fork oil, and the measurement or the amount of fork oil will vary from bike to bike. The 2011 YZ250 uses ounces as its measurement, and the standard amount is 11.2. I actually like to run a full 12 ounces of fork oil in the outer tube, which just gives me better bottoming resistance. I've already measured out the 12 ounces. We've already poured it into the outer tube. When I pour the fork oil in, I like to drop the outer tube down to here because it's a tapered shaft, and it just gives you a little bit more room to pour the oil in. And we've already done that. So basically we're done at this point. The last thing we're going to do is put the fork, or install the fork, back on the bike, set our rebound and compression clickers. Compression is up top, rebound is down here on the bottom. We're going to set those back to the standard settings and then just repeat this process for the other fork. Alright, that's it. We're done. The forks are back on the bike. Everything is reinstalled, and we reset our compression and rebound dampening clickers. We're ready to hit the track. So, don't forget to subscribe. Hit that thumbs up. Hit that notification bell if you want to get an alert next time I upload a video. And keep the rubber side down. We'll see you guys.